One more thing I just wanted to add, we've talked about meat stock, we've done videos on dashi, but just really the quick, like kind of 30-second difference between bone broth and meat stock, and then what is dashi.
So meat stock and bone broth, you can use interchangeably in recipes. So if you're making a soup at home, you can use meat stock or bone broth. Here's where the difference lies though. Meat stock versus bone broth. So meat stock is predominantly meat on bones, cooked for a fairly short time. Bone broth is predominantly bones, and that would be cooked for much longer time. So say you're talking about poultry, a chicken meat stock would be about an hour and a half. You can put a full chicken or just chicken parts or chicken feet and gizzards or any combination thereof. And that cooks for an hour and a half. Strain the meat and the other stuff out, and the liquid is your meat stock. Bone broth would be bigger carcasses, maybe after you've roasted a turkey or a chicken or a quail or what have you. That then cooks for a good 24 to 48 hours. So the content of meat stock versus bone broth are two completely different things. A bone broth can be more problematic for people who have gut issues on the go. And a meat stock tends to be better tolerated by just about everybody under the sun. So the medicine to do that gut supportive piece to help really nourish that gut lining. Because if you think about it, that intestinal lining is your protective barrier against the outside world. Like, who was it? Was it Terry Willard who says gums to bum, which I really love? Like the whole concept of gums to bum, and how you're a donut essentially, and your digestive tract is the outside world. And that intestinal lining is that barrier that keeps the inside world in and keeps the outside world out through that digestive tract. So you want to fortify that gut lining as best you can, and that's the meat stock that'll do that. Bone broth can do that, but if your gut is well, it'll do that. If your gut is not well, it can tend to make some of the stuff worse. So I tend to say, if you want to do some repair, go for the short cook meat stock. If you want to maintain what's happening at the gut, go for bone broth. If your guts are well, bone broth will work for you. If your guts are not, then you want to do meat stock. I love a meat stock because it's easier, it's shorter time, and I can do a full chicken, and then I strip the meat off and I eat it. And it really, all it is you put a full chicken, just about cover it with water, simmer for an hour and a half, like bring it up to a simmer, then set your timer for 90 minutes, and then take it off, take the chicken out, strain all the bits out, and that's your meat stock. Now you can strip the meat off and eat. When it comes to dashi, if I remember correctly, it is 2 to 3 shiitake mushrooms, the dried shiitakes, with 3 or 4 pieces of about the size of Asako's hand, was it, I think? She said, kombu strips. And that goes in cold water, in about a liter of cold water, and that sits for a good 6 to 12 hours. And then you bring it up to a simmer on the stove top. And just before the bubbles start to form, you need to pull your seaweed out, your kombu strips. And then as it starts to simmer, you could take out the shiitakes and mince them and put them back in and turn that into a delicious miso soup. And it's the medicine from the kombu strips that will actually support that gut lining piece, much like the meat stock does.
And when you soak the kombu and the shiitake in the cold water, it actually gets this kind of gelatinous like quality to it, which is the same kind of gut healing properties that's in your meat stocks and bone broth. So it's amazing.
This is a perfect time to tap into some of that wisdom of some of our ancestors. You know, the dashi is a traditional Japanese recipe that's been used for centuries and many, many, many generations. Well, meat stock and bone broth was something traditionally used and prepared in just about every culture that consumed animal foods, and that was everyone. P.S.
Yeah.
So this is, and you know, I've sort of been joking in the last couple of weeks of like the grandmothers have it. That's what I mean. They were making real food. They were doing slow food because that is the only option you had. That is what you learned from the grandmothers before and the people who were cooking and baking before you. Well, now we've really drastically changed that in the last 2 or 3 generations. And while I think my grandmother would sit in my kitchen and think, well, you've got it going on, don't you? I'd rather live when you live because you've got the ease of everything. If I could give these ways up, I would. But here's the wisdom. Give those ways up, and now you're passing on some of that power to look after your own health, and you're outsourcing that to someone.
Yeah.